piece of damn shit! Slut from China! Street whore. Jenna street whore.
We can live in peace together, or rest in peace and silence in a quiet cemetery. Peace finally comes when all the people are gone.
You suck.
The future holds for us if we don't change our way of living, if we don't change our way of thinking, if we don't start putting our faith in God up above and start loving one another, our brothers here below on earth. We've got to love everybody like we love ourselves. Red, white, black, mixed, yellow. If all of us can do this world will become heaven on earth.
Alright, fuck his soul! Stupid! You suck my dick, bitch. God damn it. Jesus goddamn fucking Christ. How the goddamn Holy Ghost fuck. God damn it. Holy Ghost, fuck. Holy Ghost, God, fuck. Stupid motherfucker. Stupid! It was my goddamn move. Holy Ghost. Holy Ghost. I fucked his. Ho! Stupid fucker. God damn it. God fucking damn it. Okay. I feel like I'm gonna have to shit in my pants if I don't get to go take a shit in the goddamn toilet in a few minutes. It smells like, I feel like, I just shit in my pants. Feels like a heavy fucking goddamn burden. I do a shit. Let's not shit in my pants. In fact, after this game, I'm gonna go take a shit in the toilet so I don't shit in my pants. I just shit in my pants. So now fuck up and take that goddamn poem. Now fuck up and take that goddamn poem so I can dick up both your rook and your whore. And fuck your hoe like a god fucking damn pro, you son of a bitch. Move! Move, you fucking whore from China! Move, you goddamn whore. I'm sorry, I've got to go shit. How do you spell relief? In this case, shit. I just took a nice red shit. I fucked his hoe. I fucked his hoe! Stupid fucker. That was gay as fuck.
What if I told you that some of the most iconic, hard-hitting legends in heavy metal known for their
We're fucking queer. 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 I fucked his hoe! Stupid fucker. Oh, she's cute as an adorable female. I'm gonna touch her
What
head.
if I told you that
Boop.
some of the most iconic, hard-hitting legends in heavy metal known for their aggressive sound, rebellious style, and masculine
because she's
energy were
cute.
actually hiding a part of themselves the world never saw?
Suck my
Behind the
slut.
screaming guitars and roaring vocals, they carried a truth that many fans never knew. These 20 metal icons didn't just break records. They quietly broke barriers too. 20.
Suck my
Rob
slut.
Halford, Judas Priest. Rob Halford, famously known as the Metal God, revolutionized heavy metal not just with his powerful vocals, but also by becoming the genre's first openly gay icon. In a groundbreaking 1998 MTV interview, Halford publicly came out, shocking many fans who had long associated metal with hypermasculine, heteronormative imagery. For decades, Halford hid his sexuality out of fear that revealing it would destroy Judas Priest's career and alienate their fan base. His leather and studs persona was both a mask and a subtle nod to his identity, with lyrics occasionally hinting at his truth, such as the song Raw Deal, which references Fire Island, a known gay community. Despite the risks, Halford's honesty was met with overwhelming support and respect, helping to break down stereotypes in a genre that was slow to embrace LGBTQ+ visibility. His courage and authenticity
God
have made
damn
him a
it.
trailblazer, inspiring countless fans and musicians alike. 19. Gal Gorgoroth. Gahal, the enigmatic frontman of Norwegian black metal band Gorgoroth, shocked the underground metal scene when he openly confirmed his sexuality in the late 2000s. Black metal, known for its extreme imagery and often hostile attitudes toward LGBTQ+ identities, was an unlikely place for such a revelation. Gahal's admission challenged the genre's
Kiss
written
that
norms
night!
and provoked
Kiss
intense
that
debate
night
within the
goodbye,
community.
slut from
Known for
China!
his intense stage presence and controversial views, Gal has never shied away from confrontation, whether about his music,
Suck my
politics,
slut.
or personal life. His
Suck my
openness
slut.
about being gay in a scene steeped in hypermasculinity and sometimes violent ideology marked a radical break from tradition. Gahal's unapologetic stance and fearless expression of identity have made him a polarizing yet pivotal figure in extreme metal. 18. Otep Shamaya. Otep Shamaya, the fierce frontman of the nu metal band Otep, is openly lesbian and known for her raw, politically charged lyrics. Emerging in the early 2000s, Otep's music blends aggressive metal with poetic storytelling, often addressing themes of identity, social justice, and personal struggle. Shamaya's openness about her sexuality and activism has made her a powerful voice in a genre that has historically been dominated by straight, male perspectives. She confronts issues like
damn it.
homophobia and misogyny head-on, using her platform to challenge metal's traditional norms. Otep's unapologetic queerness and Shamaya's commanding presence have earned her a dedicated following and a reputation as a trailblazer for LGBTQ+ representation in heavy music. 17.
I see
Roddy
what the fuck you're
Bottom,
trying to
Faith
do.
No More. Roddy Bottom, the keyboardist for Faith No More, came out as gay in the early 1990s, a bold move in the macho world of alternative and metal-influenced rock. Faith No More's eclectic sound, blending metal, funk, and experimental elements, was groundbreaking, and Bottom's openness about his sexuality helped push boundaries in a scene where queer identities were rarely visible. He has spoken candidly about how his experiences as a gay man influenced his songwriting and the band's dynamic. Despite facing homophobia and stereotypes, Bottom remained authentic, becoming a quiet but powerful advocate for LGBTQ+ visibility in heavy music.
Man, this is really starting
His
to fucking
presence
piss
helped
me
pave
off.
the way for future queer musicians in genres traditionally resistant to diversity. 16. Doug Pinnick, King's X. Doug Pinnick, bassist and vocalist for the progressive metal band King's X, publicly revealed he was gay in
This is
1998, a revelation that caused tension with parts of the band's religious fan base. Pinnick's soulful voice and heavy riffs helped define King's X's sound, which blend.
Suck my slut.
From synth new wave
Don't
pop
even
to
think about
straight
it!
up disturbing industrial metal, the pioneers of a new aggressive genre, fronted by a man that should have died before he even made his first record. During an era of pretty boys and 80s romanticism, came one of the most influentially dark records of the decade. Leader of this chaotic musical cult, Al Jourgensen, would live a substance-driven life that would put Ozzy Osbourne to shame.
Rock and roll!
This is Jesus Built My Hot Rod, the story of ministry.
From blood-covered dressing rooms to blowing up a gas station, we're taking a look at crazy Al Jourgensen stories that prove Ministry's frontman truly lived up to the rock and roll chaos.
From Ministry, you are watching 120 Minutes with Dave Kendall. Okay? Bye.
God damn it.
In '95, after a Motorhead show in Austin, Al Jourgensen went back to the tour bus after the show and asked where Lemmy was. The band pointed to the back, so Al knocked on the door, no answer, so he opened it and found Lemmy in a Gestapo uniform spanking a woman. Al quickly apologized and shut the door. He'd only go back there to offer Lemmy some coke. But when he went back to the front of the bus, he offered it to the band instead. They immediately pulled out a giant bag of meth and said, "Coke is putsch. That's Motorhead for you." Al Jourgensen used to cut himself on stage to feel more alive, leaving real blood everywhere, on stage, backstage, and even in the dressing rooms. But during one tour, the band started noticing blood trails at venues before
If only I had my fucking whore.
Yeah, say again?
This is the Greek word we translate as faith, means denying evidence or reason.
And we have demonstrations of that.
Do we have any scholars that say this is how it's defined?
I have no idea if we have scholars
Okay,
that
so
say that.
that's what
I know that we have missionaries who say that that is what it is.
Okay, are they
Then we have,
experts?
I'm sorry,
Are they the experts though?
I don't know.
Okay, how is the word pistis defined in Aristotle, Antiphon, Diodorus, Plato? Have you looked into that?
No, I haven't listened to Aristotle.
Okay,
interpreted
so
that.
then, have you done a good analysis of what the word actually means in the New Testament then, if you don't actually look at the Greek word?
So now I'm beginning to wonder that how in 20 years
Suck
of
my
this
slut!
intellectual research that he's done, how has he not understood the correct definition of what faith is, both historically and biblically? And Michael's not the first one to point it out.
And every Christian I've ever debated this with
Now
tells me that
fucking
I'm
remove that
mystifying
king
faith.
right here.
Now, the title of the debate is Christianity Dangerous? But the thought I
Well,
needed to
I
have in
think
my
I trapped
mind
it
was,
with a whore.
if Arn is so adamant about this definition that he has been corrected on this many times, then perhaps it is his own research that is perhaps flawed, biased, and dangerous to the pursuit. Hence the question I'm about to ask.
This question for Art.
Outsmarted the fuck out of
You mentioned that in 20 years of rigorous research, you found no evidence, I think you said, of Christianity. But
No, that's not what I said. I said in 20 years of
Damn,
arguing
that
with
was
Christians,
beautiful.
they told me
I
that
outsmarted
I'm
her.
wrong
about the belief in faith, that faith is not a belief that is not based on evidence.
I
say that faith is a belief that
outsmarted
is
her.
not based on evidence. They
They
all
all
say,
say,
oh,
oh,
yeah,
we have
evidence.
evidence.
I say, okay, fine. What is it?
My
And I
arms are
always
longer.
specify that I'm looking for scientific evidence. They ask, what
what
evidence
My
would
arms
I
are longer
accept?
than hers.
I said, how much evidence would you accept, they would ask? I said, I'll take anything that qualifies as evidence. Any body of objectively verifiable
This is
Or
boring!
exclusively concord with that particular
I'm
position
bored.
over any other. In 20 years,
I think
Suck
without
it.
exception,
Suck
there
my
has been no one to present any scientific evidence that actually
Suck
indicates
my
that
slut!
or indeed any god or in fact anything supernatural at all.
Okay, I appreciate the clarification.
Yeah, that doesn't change the question I'm about to ask.
So, you mentioned that in 20 years of
I'll chase that night in
you
Kingdom
found
Come!
what you're looking for. But then when Michael pressed you on naming just one scholar who defines the word faith in the way you put it, you couldn't name one. So my question is, could it be possible that your research is maybe flawed, biased, and even maybe dangerous to the pursuit of truth?
I'm coming after that.
As I explained,
I'm coming after that
over
night.
and over and over again, having this exact conversation at least
Boom.
once a week for 20 years. Not one Christian ever has produced evidence. He isn't either, nor can you. No one can. It doesn't exist. I demand that anybody in this room who calls yourself a Christian, if you think you have scientific
Shut it!
to indicate your God, bring it. You ain't got it. I win.
I'm sorry my question upset you, but that wasn't my question. But I'll move on. Thank you.
Apparently didn't like the question. Apparently didn't like being pressed in that way. But notice he never answered my question. It was a simple question. He holds a position and is continually corrected on this position. And when I call him out on that, rather than address the actual question,
How Donkey Kong wonders his night.
starts yelling, points at me and says I can't produce the version he's
Suck my
asking for, when in reality the thing I'm asking, because it's my question,
You
is how is
this
it
is
alleged years of
boring!
rigorous research, not flawed, biased, and dangerous to the pursuit of truth. So let's do a play-by-play and unpack this a little bit further.
Suck my slut. Suck my slut. Stupid! Cause that was stupid!
What's going on? What's going on? I'm Mark
Stupid,
Wilson,
stupid,
the host of
stupid,
the
stupid,
Gospel
stupid,
Truth.
stupid, stupid, stupid,
Thank you for joining me today.
The stupid machine!
I have another great show for you.
The
Like
stupid
I said,
machine!
we do have a debate. I have Mr. Arn Raw with me and Mr. Eric Hernandez. And before they come on, and a lot of guys introduce themselves, I do want to encourage you to like and follow the Gospel Truth. Please do that. Support. Like and follow Gospel Truth on YouTube and Facebook. As always, make sure you hit that notification bell. Also, all this content is on podcast. So if you're a man or a woman who like debates, man, I'm filled with them, man. So if you want to go ahead and check that out on iTunes, YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, all those podcast platforms, go ahead and check that out. With that said, let me bring these guys in. Mr. Eric Hernandez, Mr. Arn Raw. How y'all doing, fellas? What's going on with you?
Mr. Aaron Raw.
Good, thank you for having us.
All right.
It's all right.
All right. Cool, man. So we're going to jump into this, man. And I'm going to allow you guys to introduce yourselves real quick. Starting with Eric. You want to go ahead and give a quick introduction to yourself, man?
Sure. My name's Eric Hernandez. I'm the apologist lead for the Baptist General Convention of Texas, and just want to say thanks to Marlon and Gospel Truth for hosting, and for Arn for participating.
All right, thank you, Eric, for coming on the Gospel Truth. All right, Arn, go ahead and give a quick introduction to yourself, man.
Sure.
I'm fixing that ear,
official
I'm fixing
representative
that
of
ear,
American Atheists,
That cat now for the
director
left
of the Far
ear.
Left Explorer Project. I have a YouTube channel I do my activism on that has roughly 250,000 subscribers so far, and I've been doing this for a little over a decade.
Stupid!
All right, cool, man. I expect a great debate from you guys. I'm pretty excited about this one, and I've been getting a lot of chimes, a lot of people hitting me up, asking when this debate was going to happen. So here we are, man. So the way the topic of the debate is, does the soul exist? The format is 15-minute opening statements, followed by a 5-minute rebuttal. Then we're going to have a 15-minute cross-examination. The first 30 minutes, both parties get 15 minutes to cross-examine. And then after the final 20 minutes, both parties get 10 minutes each to cross-examine. Finally, after that, we have a 10-minute closing. We're going to follow up with Q&A from the audience. Sounds good?
Come on,
you're arguing affirmative in this debate, so you're up first. So, if you want to go ahead and set up your slides, and I'll let you know when we're ready.
God fucking damn it.
Alright, let me pull that up real quick there. Hold on 1 second.
Suck my slut.
No problem. Can you hear me alright?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Suck my slut. God damn it. This goddamn fucking clusterfuck. God damn it. This god fucking damn clusterfuck.
Alright,
God
take it away. We got 15 minutes.
These goddamn ponies.
Alright, so the question for tonight's debate is, does the soul exist? And I want to start by giving you 2 things that this debate is not. First, this debate is not about religion or how people came to believe in the soul. In the past, Arn said that people believed in the soul because they didn't know what air was. Doesn't apply to me, and that's irrelevant, and that would also be a genetic fallacy, so hopefully we won't get into that. Second, the debate is not a scientific fallacy. This is the case for a few reasons. First of all, it's a category fallacy. The soul, if it exists, would be a non-physical entity, and science, by definition, is a discipline that can only study the physical. Thus, while science is a wonderful tool for investigating the physical world, it has virtually nothing to say about the non-physical. In fact, science in principle cannot even ask the question, much less answer it. Some of the leading neuroscientists in the world, like Jeffrey Schwartz and Mario Beauregard, believe in the soul, and one can't say that they believe in the soul because they don't understand neuroscience, given that these are some of the men that are the leaders in neuroscience. In addition, any view that will be presented tonight regarding consciousness or the nature of the soul will be what is called empirically equivalent, meaning there is no piece of empirical data that one could give that would specifically lend support to one view over the other. Put differently, we'll agree on all the empirical data, but our conclusions that we draw from the data will be philosophical. This is because the questions are philosophical questions about metaphysics, not science. As atheist philosopher of science Michael Roos says, science does not ask certain questions, so it is no surprise that it does not give certain answers. So appealing to science to answer the question tonight would be like appealing to a ruler to measure your weight. The assessment. The case I'm going to give is just 2 basic points tonight. First is that consciousness is not physical. That is to say, it's neither identical nor reducible to anything physical like the brain. And 2, I am more than a brain and body. I am a soul. Now, the definition was the soul. The soul is an immaterial substance that contains consciousness and animates the body. Now, in order to understand that these 2 arguments, it's important to first get a foundation and a grasp of what is called Leibniz's law of the indiscernibility of identicals, and for short we'll call it Leibniz's law of identity. Now, according to Leibniz's law of identity, if 2 things in question are the same, let's say some A and B, then whatever is true of one is going to be true of the other and vice versa. However, in principle, if you can show something true of one that is not true of the other, then it follows that the 2 are not the same thing. Now, if there is no soul and there is no God, then physicalism would be true, which is the view that human beings are purely physical objects, only purely physical properties and parts. Now, the reason this is important is because if Arn is going to show there is no soul, then he's going to have nothing more than the brain. That is to say, it is identical or reducible to say to the brain. However, if this is actually not the case, and in principle we can show something that is true of the mind that is not true of the brain and vice versa, then it would follow that the mind is not identical or reducible to the brain. And if that's the case, then it would follow that consciousness is not physical, and physicalism would be false. Now, there are a good number of ways to show that this is the case.
The stupid machine!
There are quite a number of ways to show this. And
I just got myself
basically,
a
we'll
whore.
just go over a few for
I
time's
just got
sake.
myself a whore.
Using liveness as law of identity, we can actually see that the mind and brain are not identical because they share different properties. So, for example, take the states of my mind and the states of the brain. My thoughts and beliefs can be true or false, but no state of my brain is true. In fact, in the past, Arn has called consciousness a physical function of the brain, but the same problem is that my thoughts, again, can be true or false, but a state or a function of the brain cannot be true or false. In fact, it doesn't even make sense, and I wouldn't even know what that means to say that a function is true or false. I can hold beliefs to certain degrees, but I don't hold my neurons firing or brain states to certain degrees. My brain can weigh 3 pounds, but my belief that I'm speaking to Arn does not weigh 3 pounds. I can open my skull and look at my brain, but I don't open my skull and look at my thoughts, because consciousness is a first-person private access kind of thing. So, in other words, while a neuroscientist can know more about my brain than I do, he can never know more about my mental life than I do. My brain can be 7 inches long, but the smell of a rose, the taste of a banana, which is in my mind, is not 7 inches long. Mental states have intentionality, my brain states do not. For example, when I'm hungry, my neurons aren't hungry. When I have an itch, my neurons aren't itching. These are mental states that are not characteristic of my brain states. Now, while there are many more examples we could go through, it's clear and suffice to say that if the states and properties of the mind are not physical, and if all the properties of the brain are physical, then it would follow that consciousness, if it exists, cannot be something identical nor reducible to something physical like the brain, which would follow that physicalism would be false. Now, I want to point something out here, and that is that there is a difference between a cause or dependence relationship and a relationship of identity. I want to note that this is important because Arn and I would both agree that if you mess with certain regions of my brain, it would affect certain states of my mind. No one denies this, and I want to make that clear. Nevertheless, it's important to understand that cause or effect does not establish identity. So, say for example, you get a guitarist and he gets an instrument like a guitar, and if a guitar string pops, he may be unable to play the music, and thus we have a cause and effect or dependent relationship, but it doesn't follow that he is a guitar. It can also be the case that certain parts of the guitar breaking would inhibit him from playing the note C, but again, it doesn't follow that the note C is in the guitar, and if you broke it open, you would find it. Again, all that to say that just because we can show a cause, effect, or dependent relationship between a musician and his guitar or the notes in the guitar, it doesn't follow that they're the same thing. So, while I don't deny, and on my view it's actually expected that messing with states of my brain through various means can actually affect the states of my consciousness, it doesn't follow that they're the same thing. Why? Because as I mentioned in the beginning, cause or dependence is not the same thing as identity.
Don't even think about it!
If consciousness is something physical, he's going to have to do far more than show that there's a cause-effect or dependency relationship between the mind and brain. At the very least, he's going to have to show that they necessarily share all the same properties, and that there is nothing true of the mind that is not true of the brain and vice versa. In other words, he's going to have to show identity. And unless he can do that, then for him to claim that consciousness is purely physical would be something that he would have to take merely on blind pistis, aka faith. Now, another thing to point out is the irreducibility of consciousness, which I won't have time to go into detail, but atheist philosopher Thomas Nagel has pointed this out in his book that you cannot get mind from matter. And atheist philosopher Colin McGinn says that any naturalistic explanation for consciousness coming from matter would border on sheer magic. So for him, he calls this magic. So if you hear that word magic tonight, we're talking about something coming from matter, something like mind coming from matter, which these philosophers are saying is metaphysically impossible. Now, again, we don't deny that there are correlations in cause and effects, but as J.P. Moreland summarizes his philosopher Jaegwon Kim, saying that correlations are not explanations, but are in fact the very thing that need explaining. And the problem is you can't simply rearrange particles of matter and get something like consciousness coordinate into existence any more than rearranging red bricks would give you the color blue, or rearranging the furniture in my house would give you the color purple. This is just simply not something that you get by rearranging a physical structure.
Man, this is really starting to fucking piss me off.
Now, let's look at the second point that I am more than my brain and body and my soul. Now, using again the law of identity, if physicalism is true, then I am nothing more than a brain and body, and this would mean that I am a mereological aggregate, which is a collection of several parts held together in a certain structure. However, if that's the case and I'm just a purely physical object, then whatever is true of purely physical objects like aggregates would be true of me. We know that that's not the case. So let's just go over a few. One is the indivisibility of personhood, and it would go like this. I'm either a purely physical object or an immaterial soul. Purely physical objects can be divided in common percentages or degrees. I cannot be divided or come in percentages or degrees. I'm an all or nothing kind of thing. Therefore, I am not a purely physical object. Therefore, I am a soul. To understand this argument, it's important to understand the notion of a degreed and non-degreed property. A degreed property would be things that can fluctuate or come in percentages or degrees. Take, for example, the property of being hard or soft or loud. Such properties can be harder or louder or softer, so they fluctuate. Contrast that with a non-degreed property, something like the property of being even. The number 2 and the number 6 are both even, but it would make no sense to say that the number 6 is, quote, more even than the number 2, because the property of being even is an all or nothing kind of thing. It either is or it isn't, there's no in between. Now, the property of being a person, if physicalism is true, would have to be a degreed property that would be grounded in something like the brain and body. However, we know that's not the case because being a human person is not a degreed property. In other words, you can cut a table in half, and it would make sense to say you get 50% of a table, but it makes no sense to say that I cut a person in half, like my arms and legs, and I get 50% of a person. Consider the same with respect to the brain. There is a Dandy-Walker syndrome or anencephaly disease, where some people only have 50% of a brain or 10% of a brain. Well, they're not 10% or 50% persons, they're still 100% persons. Moreover, it's also the case that men are typically larger than women, but just because men have more mass and matter than women, it doesn't mean that men are more valuable or are more persons than women, and I don't really agree with that. I have no doubt about that. Moving on, we have identity change. Now, aggregates do not retain identity change, and we'll get to that in a second, but the argument is I'm either a purely physical object or an immaterial soul. If I am a purely physical object and I do not retain identity change, I do maintain identity change, therefore I am not a purely physical object, therefore I am a soul. Now, if I'm nothing more than brain and body, according to what we've learned through science, every 17 years you replace virtually every cell in your body. It's a little bit different with the brain, but you can still lose brain cells and whatnot. Now, suppose they committed a crime 17 years ago, but they just now find the evidence. Now, if the officers were to come to my house and say that, we're going to arrest you because we just now found the evidence of a crime you committed 17 years ago, it would make no sense to say that, officer, I'm no longer that person because, given that we changed, I'm just a purely physical brain and body, I'm an aggregate, and aggregates do not maintain identity change. Of course, you would laugh at me and slap on the cuffs. Interestingly, philosopher Jack Von Kim that I mentioned earlier, he gives a similar argument which reflects on in his book. He says, in 2011, this brain and body did not exist, but I did exist in 2011, therefore I cannot be identical nor reducible to this brain and body, and I will conclude on that, therefore I am a soul. Next we have an argument from free will. It would go as follows. I'm either a purely physical object or an immaterial soul. 2. If I'm a purely physical object and I do not possess free will. I do possess free will, therefore I am not a purely physical object, I am a soul. Now, to understand this, it's important to first, let me say what free will is. Free will I would define as being the originator or source of your will or actions. You're the first mover. Now, Aristotle used an illustration. He said, if I move a rock with my staff, then you could say that the staff moved the rock, my hand moved the staff, but what moved me? Now, if there is no soul and there is no God, then the law of causal closure would be true, which states that every physical event must necessarily have a prior physical cause. So if Arnold wants to believe there is free will, he's going to have to somehow show that he is the first mover to his will or actions. Now, what you can say at this point is, if you're going to say that your hand moved, you're going to have to point to something physical given the law of causal closure. You can say that your brain, a brain state, like a brain firing, causes your hand to move, that causes the staff to move, that causes the rock to move, but given that it's a physical event, you would still need a prior physical cause. At this point, you only have two options. You can get into an infinite regress of brain firings and physical events, but then that would mean that the action would never happen. Or at some point, you can point to something beyond the physical and say that something beyond you caused that brain firing to fire, which caused the hand to move, that caused the staff to move, that caused the rock to move, but then you're no longer the first mover, you're merely an intermediate secondary mover. Now, that is to say, if all you are is something purely physical, you're not going to have free will. Now, I don't know what Arn's position is on free will, but I will say this. If Arn wants us to believe that he came to be an atheist freely, that is to say, he came to be an atheist based on intellectual reasons, and if he believes that religious people are morally accountable for their beliefs and for what they do, then he's going to have to posit something like a soul. If you give up free will, you give up intellectual integrity and moral responsibility. So if Arn came to be an atheist, and if he wants to hold religious people accountable for their beliefs, then something like a soul must exist. So in summation, you can say that if consciousness exists, it can't be physical. If you're the same person from one moment to the next, you must be more than brain and body. If men and women are equally valuable, then physical existence can't be true. And if Arn truly came to be an atheist and holds religious people more responsible, then something like a soul must exist. Therefore, if we put all these together, we can say that here is a problem that Eris must face tonight. If he is conscious, if he is the same person at the beginning and end of this debate, if he is not above or more valuable than anyone, and if he freely came to be an atheist and is accountable for his actions, then it must be the case that physicalism is false, the soul must exist, and that would be the end of the debate. Thank you.
All right. Eric, thank you for that 50-minute opening statement. All right, Rob, you're up for your 50-minute opening.
Right. When the organizers of this debate invited me to participate, it was under a slightly different topic. It was suggested we would do, is there evidence of a soul? And I said then I couldn't resist this topic as long as we were only talking about scientific evidence, since nothing else would make sense in this context.
Like cutting off your right ear!
Verifiable facts, and what have we got? 13 seasons of Ghost Hunter, where they still never found anything ever, and we know they never will, but they always pretend like they did in every episode. The best you could have is when something can neither be explained as true nor confirmed to be true in the first place. There's nothing to explain. Besides, being unexplained is not an explanation. Yet, in the entire history of bewildering entity claimed by spiritualists of every sort in any religion, none of them have ever shown even the slightest substance for their phantasms. No reason to believe that there was even a there there. Instead, what we typically always only ever see are empty assertions of impossible nonsense, or we find frauds. Like when that toddler got rich and famous, selling 10 million books claiming to have been to heaven in a near-death experience. Only to admit years later that he lied, being coached by his parents. He's not the only example of those type hoaxes. Religion is rife with them and based on them. So I said to the organizers, all I ask is that Eric share with me whatever peer-reviewed articles he intends to source a week before the debate, to rebut them if I can, or at least confirm that they actually do say what he says they do. If they do, then I will have no choice but to admit that to the audience when the time comes. But I should never have to take an opponent's word for some inside study that supports their position, because in my experience they usually don't. I often see scientific articles represent candidates, and you finally get to the point where you can read it afterwards and find out everybody does say or support what they said that they did, but you can't do anything about that when first you've heard of it is during the debate, and you can't comment on what you haven't read. However, Eric instead said that he'd just dropped the reference to evidence and changed the topic of our debate to, does the soul exist? So that we're no longer restricted to, required to have, or much less allowed to share scientific evidence at all. And now, apparently, it's been precluded as a category fallacy.
Crushed.
I thought you, the audience, should know that. So how do people come to imagine that we have an invisible spiritual version of ourselves hidden inside our physical bodies, driving them around like vehicles? If that were the case, there would be a way for science to determine that, even if the soul is supernatural. And yet the soul is supposed to be separate from our bodies, as if we could abandon these material machines and become pedestrians, or possess someone else's body and drive that around for a while, or trade in your own body when it breaks down for a new model in case of reincarnation. When I was into paranormal mysticism myself, I used to think that the material components had to be animated by spiritual life force, essentially what George Stahl proposed in 1708 in his medical theory of animism, the foundation of vitalism, wherein life and disease were explained by an animating spirit inhabiting every part of the body. in which case it would be people who have the spiritual component of everything alive, including animals, plants, fungus, and even bacteria. In other words, if I have a soul, then so does a tree, so does an amoeba. If you have a soul, then your dog clearly does too. Like when Obi-Wan Kenobi said that the Force is an energy field created by all living things, as if life is the spiritual biosphere enveloping and animating bits of the material world. That was my belief at the time, because I was conditioned by New Age hippie culture and fooled by our deceptive media, which talked about ectoplasm and parapsychology as if either of those were real. Of course, it turns out this notion of living energy, the theory of vitalism, was disproved in 1828. There is no life force animating our bodies, and our current understanding of biology in the 21st century shows that there was never need for such a thing. Our media likes to tell us that we're only using 10% of our brain, when in fact we use the full 100%. The basal portions regulate glands and bodily functions, process sensory input, enable motor control, and so on. But the number of neurons we have in the cerebral cortex or gray matter is the 10% of our brains that do the higher order thinking, whence our wisdom, intelligence, and personalities emerge. And this is what most people seem to envision as their soul, what makes them down. While some enlightened spiritualists associate the soul with consciousness, as if the brain can't think or know anything without the soul inside it. Believers always imagine a man behind the curtain pushing buttons or pulling levers. Consciousness is just an awareness of self or a perception of surroundings. You don't have to have human intelligence to have consciousness. You really don't even need a brain for that, as there are simple animals with no brain at all, and maybe no organs either, that are obviously able to perceive and react to aspects of their environment without any neurons. There is even a unicellular organism that's demonstrated a capacity for memory and reason in laboratory tests, though few people would argue that a paramecium or a slime mold has a soul. It's just that having more sensory systems and a brain to better coordinate them gives you a greater awareness and higher consciousness. So the topic that always comes up is what happens when we're not conscious. I've actually heard spiritual leaders argue that when you're asleep and your mind travels to a metaphysical plane, they believe that dreams are real and that reality is a dream. But what if you're not just asleep? What happens when the brain gets shut down and seems dead, but doesn't actually die and is somehow resuscitated later? This is when a small percentage of people suffering cardiac arrest or what have you may report a near-death experience, which in the U.S. tends to be described as a period of inexplicable perception where there is no detectable brain activity, yet the patient still has at least the ability to hear and remember what was said later. How does the memory function when there is no brain activity due to a lack of oxygen? I know that leukemia patients in an oxygen-deprived state shift into an unconscious stage where the body tries to minimize all costly functions in an attempt to preserve the brain for as long as possible. If this goes on for too long, leading to brain damage, then how did your supernatural immortal soul lose the ability to think properly? If we are just spiritual passengers in these physical vehicles, then it wouldn't be possible to change our personalities. Come on, you slut! Chemical drugs or physical damage to the brain. Spiritual beings are separate from and entirely independent of physical or chemical effects. Yet, we know that drugs and surgery and other physical trauma can and definitely do affect who we are and how we think and feel, which all by itself should be evidence enough that there is no soul. While we don't yet know how this happens, I suspect that when the brain is extremely stressed, the mind, which is produced by the brain, goes into something like a computer's safe mode, because biochemical systems like breathing and so on are controlled by the brain and yet still function even when the brain isn't showing any activity. During such times, a few of those people who report near-death experiences also report heightened perceptions that are impossible for physical senses, like out-of-body experiences. The reason I got into transcendental meditation when I was a spiritualist is because I was fascinated by out-of-body experiences, which I took to be first-hand observation of the spiritual world. I have to prove everything scientifically. I had repeatedly achieved the unmistakable vibrations at the initial stage of that, but I was never able to transcend the flesh to see my own body from outside. And more frustrating than that was whenever I interviewed other people professing to have had these experiences under various circumstances, I found that there was no consistency between their accounts, like there certainly would be if it were really real. On the same problem in peer-reviewed studies. For example, Jeffrey Long is a medical doctor promoting the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation. He published a paper establishing their reality by listing similarities like the contrast of bright light with tunnel vision and the sensation of having found your happy place, which is not surprising given the extreme stress of an existential threat. But the paper also endorses dubious claims made in anecdotal accounts of his patients, and it ignores important disparities that call all of the associated assumptions into question. For one thing, other studies report less consistency with some patients having terrifying experiences too. Some patients report seeing the spirit of their dead father or something like that. How did you recognize him if he didn't have his body? Why would a spiritual being look exactly like the body he used to operate? None of us look like our cars. Was your father's spirit naked? Of course not. In the spirit world, everybody has ghost clothes. A number of studies have shown that the description of near-death experiences differs significantly depending on that person's religious perspective. And one illustrated experiment involved the God knowledge. Significant stress to the brain can be safely duplicated without being near death, such as being flung around in a centrifuge for astronaut training. The so-called God helmet is a device that electronically stimulates the brain in subtle ways. The most common so-called God helmet is a device that significant stress to the brain can be safely duplicated without being near death, such as being flung around in a centrifuge for astronaut training. The so-called God helmet is a device that electronically stimulates the brain in subtle ways, safely duplicated without being near death, such as being flung around in a centrifuge for astronaut training. The so-called God helmet is a device that electronically stimulates the brain in subtle ways. The most common reaction people have is the idea that another unspecified but intelligent presence is in the room with them. Some thought this was something like a ghost, a demon, or what have you, or one person thought it was himself in an out-of-body experience. And Susan Blackmore, who claims to have been out of her body in the past, said that the God helmet was a similar sensation, and also one of the most extraordinary experiences she's ever had, apparently better than the real thing. However, famous atheist Richard Dawkins described only feeling slightly dizzy and quite strange, but otherwise pleasantly relaxed. This is consistently what happens as anecdotal religious claims are put to the test. They are found to be subjective, implausible, and not likely genuine experiences of anything supernatural. For another example, near-death experiences reported by Hindus don't match what is typically reported by people raised in Abrahamic faiths. More importantly, Hindus report meeting their gods and so on during these experiences. You should read their accounts, they're quite different. I have a video where a Swami claimed that his consciousness ascended out of his body to meet his God, and he was even able to say how small the soul is, and exactly what chakra the SIM card of the body goes in. A visiting journalist asked the Swami why it is that a near-death experience, Christians see Jesus, Buddhists see Buddha, and people of other religious faiths see whatever they expected to see. Because, Hindus don't see Jesus and Christians don't see Krishna. There is never a revelation of spirituality that the subject did not already know and believe in, which indicates that mystic visions and near-death experiences are illusions that only accentuate preconceived notions. The Swami answered that people experience whatever they believe because there's one God taking many forms. So that ultimately there is no truth to the idea that one must accept Jesus to be saved or that there's a hell to be saved from. That's just what we were conditioned to believe in the Christian culture. He's able to make that judgment about y'all, but he's unable to recognize that he is only reciting what he was conditioned to believe, because Hindus see near-death experiences as proof of their reincarnation from past lives. Everyone wants to believe Yoda when he says, luminous beings are not exclude matter. Yoda was a muppet. We are not in any sense separable from our physical form. Everything that makes us who we are,
push boy bitch,
is what we are. We know we have these bodies. We don't know that there's a soul, nor could we have. Astrophysicists science can say that something is possible or impossible. And I give him a number of absurd examples, and he would always say, well, it's highly improbable. Only when it came to the soul did Carroll finally say that we know for certain that doesn't and can't happen. He supports that with a rather impressive physics equation and an explanation.
Don't even think about it!
In summary, he says that either some ill-defined metaphysical substance not subject to the known laws of physics interacts with atoms in our brains in ways thus far eluded by every controlled experiment in the history of science, or people hallucinate when they're near death. What he's saying is that there's no possible way to remove your mind from your body, because your body is the source of your mind. There is no theoretical or metaphysical model for how yourself, whatever that would be, could be in any sense you, yet not be both in and of your body, not just some body, your body. Your life experiences have built a network of synaptic connections in your brain for everything you've learned through repetition and rehearsal and discussion and so on.
Suck my slut.
These are physical formations that are literally connected to everything you know or remember. If you were to suffer a stroke, your thinking would be impaired. And you might be able to rebuild those connections, become fluid again. Most people never recover. But even if you could, that still proves that you were dependent on that cerebral mesh in the first place. Philosopher Daniel Dennett says that the mind is an emergent aspect of the body, not just one part of the brain, but the whole brain collectively, and really the rest of the body too. Even your endocrine system influences some portion of who and what you are, including your desires and aspects of your sexuality. Even if you could remove your mind and place it in someone else's body, it wouldn't be you anymore. Because your mind is not just data, and you're not just the things you know or remember. The neural pathways in that other brain would literally change your mind, forcing you to think differently. The neurons and legs have different skills and talents than your old body did, and that other endocrine system would alter many of your preferences and your emotions, making you someone else. You wouldn't even recognize yourself anymore because you wouldn't be you anymore. You would be that other body. I don't know how I got into to get through that with all the pandemonium of the dogs going crazy around me. That's just what happens here.
All right, thank you, Arn. Thank you, Arn, for that opening statement. Thank you both for your opening statements. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and go to a rebuttal round. Each person will get 5 minutes to rebut their opponent. Starting with Mr. Eric Hernandez, you have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Suck my slut.
Thanks. Yeah, all that was irrelevant to whether or not the soul exists. I'm a bit surprised. One thing, so I don't even know if I'll use 5 minutes. I might. So he said that the topic was dropped from what it was initially. No, it wasn't dropped because it was never the topic in the first place. Marlon presented a topic to both of us, and I'm guessing you replied first and said, yes, we want to do that. And I said, actually, I'd like to change it to this topic because I want Aaron to have two barrier burden of proof and not just say I'm not convinced. And I know that he's going to want to, I'll just leave it at that. So yeah, it was never dropped, it was just never the topic to begin with. So given the topic that we have now, it's Aaron's job to show why there is no soul and give a case for it. All I heard was a bunch of assertions and empty claims. I didn't hear any evidence behind that, but maybe we can get into that with the cross-examination. So he bears a burden of proof to show something. He said, looking for empirical evidence. We're going to, I'm sure, get into that later because I'm curious what empirical evidence is that the brain functions, the brain knows things, like he asserted. He mentioned Sean Carroll. Sean Carroll is not an expert in the philosophy of mind, nor is that his field. He can talk about that, but that's not telling me what Sean Carroll thinks would be like me quoting to you what a street preacher is saying and showing, hey, look at the street preacher, here's why he says evolution is false. And I know you would laugh at that. So quoting Sean Carroll to me regarding philosophy of mind would be like me quoting a street preacher to you regarding evolution. He talked about Dennett. Dennett actually denies consciousness. Him and John Searle, both atheist philosophers. Both atheist philosophers of mind. John Searle, I think, really showed him where he was wrong. But Dennett denies consciousness and appeals to some type of eliminative behaviorism, which is a type of physicalism. Aaron didn't tell us which of the 5 versions of physicalism he holds to, which is a little bit odd to leave out in debate on the soul. He didn't provide a case for why there can be no soul or what his position is in the soul, other than, again, just mere assertions. He says that if you were put in another body, you would think differently, and it would change your emotions and your preferences, and that would make you literally a different person. Interesting. So he seems to concede my point that you're not one person from one moment to the next. So I'm wondering at what point does he change and become literally a different person? Is Arn a different person than what he was yesterday because he now has a different set of beliefs and thoughts and memories? Is he literally a different person than when he was 5? So he's not the same person that developed and grew. No, it was literally someone different. That's quite strange, but I'll let Aaron defend and talk about that maybe when we get into some cross-examination. There really wasn't much for me to talk about. He talked about ghost hunters and some other things that have absolutely nothing to do with whether or not the soul exists, anything with regards to what I said. So I guess it still stands, and I know that, and I want to be fair, that was his opening statement. It wasn't a rebuttal to mine, so I'm not going to say that. I am interested in hearing what he's going to say for a rebuttal, but
Again, it was largely irrelevant. I'm curious how much you prepared for this debate, because I was hoping to hear some arguments against it, and even though I believe so, I can give plenty of arguments why people think or would support physicalism, and I can give you the different 5 versions of
This is boring! Oh my good goddamn... Oh my lord shit. Oh my lord shit. Oh my lord shit. Miss Pitt. Spit, 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 spit. I want to see the smelly Shelly again. Where's Pitt? God fucking damn it. Suck my slut. Not him. Where's Pitt? Where's spit, spit, spit. She's a smelly Shelly. With Pitt, smelly Shelly, cushy rhymes. Suck my dick, bitch. Suck my fucking dick, bitch. With spit, spit, spit. With Pitt, smelly Shelly, cushy rhymes. With spit, spit, spit. With spit, spit, spit. With Pitt, smelly Shelly, cushy rhymes. With Pitt. With spit, spit, spit. But god damn it. Suck my motherfucking dick, bitch.
Wasn't a rebuttal to mine, so I'm not trying to say that. I am interested in hearing what he's going to say for a rebuttal, but again, it was largely irrelevant. I'm curious how.
That you folks start looking at what sort of a lesson needs to be learned here, and I hope it's one of institutional change. There's a massive celebrity culture happening in evangelism that needs and breeds and covers up for narcissistic male leaders.
No.
Right. And as long as we make this just about Robbie, that's going to keep happening. It seems to me anyway.
Yeah, and that's where the story has been, is on Robbie, and there's very few talking about what's the organization that made this possible. What situation made this possible. I just want to cover one last element of this before I want to get your take on what you think is going to happen over the next couple of weeks and months. But I know that Robbie's son Nathan's been posting quite a bit and has specifically alluded to you pretty clearly. I personally, I understand
Shelly,
probably some of the hurt and there's a lot of probably confusion on that side, but then also the evidence is there, and so it seems like a case where one probably just wasn't like to put out a statement when things are this raw and fresh, but also I'm curious what your thoughts are on some of the posts that have been made, specifically referring to you just being on this vendetta or being this crazy. I think that was the adjective that was used, this kind of crazy person to bring down Robbie. Like, what's kind of your response? What were your takeaways from seeing some of that stuff go out?
Well, I think some of those folks should keep their mouths shut. I don't think Nathan Zacharias is really helping his family cause right now. I should say that I wasn't a model discussant in my early years in my first 6 months or so. I mean, I put out videos that were not well thought out. I had my facts down cold, but my tone was often mocking, and it gave them an excuse to say, we're not going to listen to this guy because he sounds kind of crazy. And I did sound kind of crazy, and I pretty quickly removed those videos and started putting up less crazy ones. So they had an excuse early on to say this guy's wacko, let's ignore him. It didn't last very long. And if they really wanted to, even if the crazy person is giving you evidence that your house is on fire, if the evidence is good and if you really care about the issue, you're going to look at the evidence regardless of who's giving it to you. So Nathan, Robbie was himself the model of craziness on this. I don't know if you saw in Ruth Malhotra's letter, she has a segment of a blog post that he wanted published that was about me. She called it Robbie's Obsession with Steve Hoffman. And he accused me of hiring private investigators to follow him and his family, which is just absurd.
You whore.
He suggested that I'd hack their phones, and these are just wild and crazy things that I don't know where he got anything like this. Yeah, I hired private investigators to do really mundane things. One I hired to check out the Thompsons, the public record, the public records in Canada to see if Robbie's claim that the Thompsons were in financial distress was true. It had nothing to do with stalking Robbie. And I hired a private investigator to go to the library of a seminary in New York where Robbie said he'd been chair of the department because I knew there were no departments, but I actually needed someone to go there and I wasn't going to fly to New York to do it. So I hired two private investigators. For Robbie to then say that I hired private investigators to follow him and his family is just, he's either just a vicious liar or a paranoid. In a psychiatric kind of way. He's really one of the two. I don't see any way.
I mean, we know he was a rampant liar, but also with the amount of stuff that he was doing, he probably was a little bit paranoid because he had people like you on his tail.
Could be.
Suck my slut!
I don't know. I mean, he mentioned in his lawsuit that sometimes he needed high security because they were death threats in various Middle Eastern countries. So I don't think he had an easy life, but none of that excuses the kinds of things he did to the Thompsons and the kinds of things he did to these women and the kind of things, the public statements he made to donors about proclaiming innocence and just the whole thing of pretending to be a devout man who really cared about the dictates of the gospel and of Christianity. He was absolutely not following what he preached.
Not!
Well, I know we're kind of near the end of our time here. I'm curious if you could see anything happen over the next few weeks, or if you're looking for something specific to happen over these next few weeks. I know you mentioned, obviously, questioning institutions, but do you kind of have, when you're waking up and checking the news, are you looking for anything specific? Are you expecting anything?
Both of us are stupid.
What are you kind of looking forward to over the next couple of weeks and months as we dig a little bit deeper than just the initial scandal?
Yeah, I don't know what to expect. I can tell you two things that I'm really hoping for. First of all, I'm hoping that somebody does a really thorough investigation on immigration fraud, because I think this was, I suspect there was human trafficking going on. I suspect that there was really bad stuff that Ravi did not pull off on his own. So the immigration fraud issue, the human trafficking issue, I think is where we see real complicity on the part of the organization, whether it's RCIM or Wellspring International or the Zacharias. Stupid! But this was not just Ravi acting alone. So I'm hoping that some folks, and it'll probably have to be people on the inside, maybe a new board, will say, we need to look into this and find out what complicity there was on the part of the organization. That's one thing I really hope. Again, immigration fraud.
Stupid! God, you're stupid as shit.
The other part is, I'm hoping that there'll be a real serious bit of self-reflection and looking at the institutional issues here. This was the evangelical Christianity, and I'm no expert, but it sure seems to me like it is addicted to its charismatic, narcissistic, primarily male, but also some female leaders. And this is a recipe for disaster. This is a recipe for abuse. This is a recipe for dishonesty and being able to say whatever you want because you know nobody's going to hold you accountable. If 35 or 40 years ago, whenever it was that Ravi first got started, 40-some years ago, if Ravi had gotten nudged by his Christian colleagues, senior Christian colleagues as a young minister, and someone had said, Ravi, you can't do this. You can't start calling yourself a doctor without letting it be known that it's an honorary doctor. Or they started later saying, no, you can't call yourself a Cambridge educated. You can't do this, Ravi. Things would have been different, but not a single person did that. As far as I know, not a single Christian ever confronted Ravi Zacharias publicly on his credential fraud, which was open and blatant, and anyone who wanted to see would have been able to see it. So there's an institutional element here that I'm hoping you guys talk about, because again, it's just going to be more abuse and more lack of integrity if evangelical Christianity really pins its hopes on charismatic figures, charismatic leaders who can get butts on pews and who can make bucks off books. That's the culture now. That's more important than integrity. That's even more important than the religion. And that's the discussion that I hope happens.
Right.
And it's not my department. It's not my group.
Right. No, I think that's important, and that's what I'm hoping happens as well. Like you said, the scandal is easy to share, and there's people get excited about the big story, but it takes a lot of perseverance and digging into those minute details. I mean, it seems even strange saying minute details with the type of thing we're talking about, but the things that go beyond just those kind of headlines, and really dive into, what's the paperwork say? What is this? How is it structured? Because that's how you prevent it moving forward. And I've said it before, I know you get a lot of people who don't, but I appreciate the work you put into this, and for putting in that patient kind of work digging away at this. Are you planning on amending your book a little bit to include some of this, or are you gonna?
Good question. I really would like to not do that. I'm very eager to wash my hands of all things Ravi Zacharias. I mean, it's been a really negative headspace for the past 5.5 years. I did it because it fell into my lap and I realized that no one else was doing it. And so I pursued it and I kept finding more and more dirt. But it's not something I'm really enjoying, and I think I've done what I can do. I don't want to keep digging up Ravi Zacharias dirt. There's other folks doing that now, and so I'm happy to retire from that. So I'm hoping that someone writes a really thoughtful and thorough book on Ravi that includes the spa scandals, the immigration issues, evaluates them psychologically, because there's a very rich story there, and also looks at the institutional issues. But I don't think it's going to be me. I should say, Eric, there are people. I'm really encouraged that there are some folks Christian folks who are looking at the institutional issues from an academic point of view and trying to do something about it. I know Lori Ann Thompson is very interested in this. She's since got a master's degree that touches on how abuse like this happens within organizations. There's a scholar at the University of Oregon named Jennifer Freyd who is looking into this on an academic level, but hoping to bring about some more awareness of the institutional abuse, betrayal blindness, what keeps people from speaking out, what keeps people from going along with abusive leaders. And these are really important issues, and I'm very happy to hear that there seems to be some momentum for getting more attention on those issues. So that's what I'm hoping for.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm hoping for the same. And again, thank you so much for all the work you've done in this, and hope you do get to Step Boy soon. And I know that'll probably be a relief after all this time. But I'm glad people are paying attention. It's taken
really
long enough to get there.
So, thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me on, Eric.
Thank you for listening to the Preacher Boys podcast. If you appreciated the content on the show, please leave a review on iTunes, and don't forget to connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter with the handle @PreacherBoysDoc. Additional information can always be found on PreacherBoysDoc.com.
I'm coming after that damn fucking... Suck my motherfucking dick, bitch. God damn it. God damn it. God fucking damn it. God damn it.
Friends, I just want to take a few minutes here to just share from my heart about the Ravi Zacharias scandal. And if you're not familiar with what's going on, Ravi Zacharias was a very famous speaker, author, apologist, very influential in the apologetics community. Many apologists would say that his organization and his lectures and books and words were incredibly impactful in their own journeys toward becoming apologists. He died of cancer last May, and allegations have been brought out of sexual misconduct. You can go online to look at all of those, and in the last few days, Ravi's organization, RZIM, has confirmed that their ongoing investigation shows that he is guilty of sexual misconduct. And in fact, in the report, they even say, and I'll just quote this here, it says, credible evidence that Mr. Zacharias engaged in sexual misconduct over the course of many years. Some of that misconduct is consistent with and corroborative of that which is reported in the news recently. And some of the conduct we have uncovered is more serious. And so, not only with and corroborative of that which is reported in the news recently, and some of the conduct we have uncovered is more